Hello, Cleveland, and thanks for joining us on this special holiday episode of Too Much Effing Perspective. I'm your host, Alex Hofmann.
And I'm your co-host, Alan Keller. You know, this has been quite a year for the show, Alex. Not only did we get to talk with some really monumental people like Fred Armisen, Stuart Copeland from The Police, Jerry Casale from Devo, but we also joined the Evergreen Podcast Network and got our very first sponsor, DistroKid, which you can still gift to your favorite musician for 30% off at distrokid.com/VIP/TMEP.
And what would the holidays be without a shameless plug like that, Alan?
Commerce will always be part of the holidays, Alex, even if it sometimes doesn't exactly fit the spirit of the moment. Like the holiday Spinal Tap moment that our friend Corin Tucker from Sleater-Kinney gifted us for this very episode.
Yeah, Corin tells us about the time a local newspaper decided to boost their punk bona fides by photographing the band wrapping Christmas gifts.
So punk.
One of the first photo shoots that I think Sleater-Kinney did, probably at the end of 1995. I think it was like right after we recorded Dig Me Out in December. I think it was the Seattle Rocket was like, we're doing a holiday issue and we want to have the band wrapping Christmas presents. And we had probably just made a deal with Kill Rock Stars, meaning like talk to Kill Rock Stars. There was no contract or anything, but we talked to them about putting out this record. So they're like, great, it'll be good publicity for the record coming out next year. So you're going to do this photo shoot. And somehow we got talked into it with these like giant fake Christmas presents, trying to be, you know, this tough band. And I think you can imagine the looks on our faces. I think I was the only person that smiled, let me put it that way, but definitely not on Janet or Carrie's faces with these like fake Christmas presents at this really silly photo shoot for the holidays. That's my Spinal Tap moment. And happy holidays to everybody.
So Alex, those gifts Sleater-Kinney had to wrap for that photo shoot were really coal in the stocking compared to the gift that Radiohead gave you back when you were working with them, right?
Yeah, they sure were. I'm surprised you remember that story, Alan, but...
Oh, I remember everything. And don't you forget it.
Yeah, this is as holiday appropriate as The Christmas Carol, and 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, actually. So settle in.
Wait, let me get my earmuffs, my mug of hot cocoa, and my MMA fighter sweater on for this story.
You said earmuffs. I'm glad you didn't say earplugs. Thanks. You're a chum. Anyway, so yeah, after doing 2 U.S. tours as tour manager with Radiohead in 1993, and of course the success of Creep and their album Pablo Honey, Radiohead offered to fly me to the U.K. for their holiday party, which was just really wonderful. So I basically, at age 26, I got on my first ever transatlantic flight to London Heathrow. And I was obviously very excited, but I was also getting sick. And I knew that, unfortunately, that I had at least a bad cold coming on. So flew through the night, landed at Heathrow. And who do you think was there to meet me?
Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, geez, I wish.
You love the steel lady.
Yeah, exactly. Wasn't she the Iron Lady?
Oh, I always get the medals wrong. My periodic table is upside down. So
Anyway, Radiohead guitar player Ed O'Brien had driven down from Oxford to pick me up, and it was great to see him. He greeted me with his famous smile. And as we drove back to Oxford, Ed told me that he had been up all night. I don't even remember why he had not slept, but the plan was for us to stay at his dad's house and sleep most of the day for me to shake off the jet lag and then go to the party that night. So we got to his dad's house, and it was a cool place because the house had once upon a time, I think, been like 2 farmers' cottages that were combined into one home, and it was several hundred years old. So you walk in the place, and in the living room, the ceilings are maybe, the beams and everything are 5'10". I'm 6'2". Ed is 6'5". So we are like, basically walking around bent over at the waist in the main room of the house. So, I was given a comfortable room as my bedroom, but the combination of jet lag, a lot of light coming through the window, and the fact that there was a heavy blanket on it, which I was either roasting hot when it was on or freezing cold when it was off, meant that I really never did get to sleep. So I kind of lay there for a while, trying not to panic, but then got up and began to wander around the house. Went down to the kitchen and I met Ed's dad, John, Dr. John O'Brien, and Ed's stepmom, Sally. They poured me a cup of tea and it was really quite nice. So later that night, we went to the party, and the party was at the offices and recording studio of Radiohead's managers, Chris Hufford and Bryce Edge, who had been in a band in the 80s called Aerial FX. I think you can still find their music on Spotify. And they had taken their recording advance or something like that, and they had built a recording studio with it, which was very smart because once the band broke up, they were then able to turn the recording studio into a business and started recording local bands. And that's how they met Radiohead, by doing demos for them and stuff like that. So the party was there in their offices and in the studio, and it was great fun. All 5 band members were there: Tom, Johnny, Colin, Ed, and Phil. And, their girlfriends were there. Wives of the managers were there, neighbors, friends, schoolmates, things like that. So it was really fun for me to be in their space, be in their environment, and meet people like their girlfriends whose names I'd heard while out on the road. And so that was a lot of fun. I also met Blur's manager while I was there. And I did not tell him the story that back when we were on tour together, Tom had said to me kind of out of the blue, "We're bigger than Blur in Japan." I kind of shrugged, and my thinking was like, so what? I didn't even know who Blur was, but like I said, oh, that's cool. But, perhaps there was some unknown rivalry between Radiohead and Blur, not unlike the Oasis Blur fight.
Well, you notice that he didn't bring up that they were bigger than Spinal Tap in Japan, because you really can't top a hit like Sex Farm.
He didn't say that. You're right about that. So anyway, the party was a lot of fun. I got some fun pictures, which we'll share via our socials. So when that night was over, I was certainly happy to be there, but also feeling that sickness that I'd felt before even leaving the U.S. begin to get stronger. And by the next morning, I was definitely feeling, as the Brits might say, feeling shite.
Alex, do you always get sick when you travel? Because when we went to Austria, Czech Republic, Hungary, you had a cold and were popping garlic pills, and I almost murdered you in the car. Remember that fine moment when I was like, "Alex, you stink." And he's like, "Do you want me to get sick?" But I didn't know that was your natural state on the road, that you were so weak and such a lightweight traveling.
Basically, I told you to shut up before you ruined the trip. That's what I said.
You did. You did not roll down the window. That's all I got to say. And I remember that to this day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're living in a tour bus with 10 other people, it's kind of a petri dish. And so things spread around, so to speak. But in any case, so I was feeling worse, but we did meet the managers and a couple other band members that next morning at a village pub to have some breakfast. And that was kind of cool because it was right next to a church where George Orwell is buried.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
It was neat. And I had a hunter's pie, which had venison, pheasant, and stuff like that in it. I thought I was going to love it. I mean, having grown up in the upper Midwest on Swanson's pot pies, I just thought, wow, this will be just that much better. But
no, that's real. That's real meat. That's roadkill meat.
Yeah, well, yeah. But as I began to feel worse and worse, Ed decided to take me to his aunt and uncle's pharmacy, see if they had something they could give me. And I think it was the uncle who took a tongue depressor and a flashlight, looked down my throat and saw something was happening that wasn't pleasant, but he couldn't give me the OxyContin because I didn't have a prescription. So what do you think I had to do?
Colonic.
That would have been an excellent suggestion. This was England, right? This was not the land of capitalistic healthcare. This was the land of the lauded National Health Service. So I had to somehow get an appointment, even though I was not a British citizen, didn't have a card, all this stuff. I think Ed's dad, Dr. O'Brien, maybe pulled some strings or something to get me in. And it was so funny because the doctor saw me, was very friendly, gave me a prescription. And when I said, well, what do I owe? He kind of shrugged I'm almost positive I just paid in cash with a 20-pound note. I could have left a chicken and a gallon of milk once upon a time. But
We didn't finish that pie, so you could have just left your leftovers.
True. You know, I guess the good news is I got to go to the party and it was a lot of fun. The bad news is that I wasn't feeling that well for most of the time I was there. So the last night I was there was going to be a night out with the band and they were all going to meet at some club somewhere in Oxford. And I just wasn't up to it. And Ed was a great caretaker. You know, he was bringing me breakfast and tea and things like that. As much as he was probably wishing I would just go, check into a hostel somewhere. And yeah, so I was not up to joining that gathering. And so Ed basically set me up in his dad's living room with some hot tea and the movie The Snapper in the VCR.
Oh, I know that movie well.
Do you?
Yes, that was the movie my wife went to with another guy when I liked her. I don't like The Snapper.
You know, you and I are similar that way. We have certain grudges we hold for nigh on 30 plus years.
That's right. Yes.
Especially when it comes to certain songs or whatever, where a girl jilted you at the junior high dance, said you wouldn't dance with you. I hate that song, even still. Anyway, so I had one more day in England and I wanted to go to London. And so Colin Greenwood, Radiohead's bass player, and I took the bus from Oxford to London. And it was kind of funny because at a newsstand at the bus stop, he purchased copies of the legendary NME and Melody Maker so that he could read them on the bus and see what gossip about Radiohead was being shared in the national music press. So I thought that was kind of funny. So we got into the bus station in London. Colin bid me farewell warmly. And then I spent the day and had breakfast with another tour mate, Ian Bickerton from the band Balloon, who I had toured with during the summer of '92. Great to spend time with him. And then as I was crossing the street from the bus station to go somewhere else, all of a sudden someone whaps me on the shoulder. And it was the drummer from the Auteurs, Glenn Collins, who'd been on the tour when I was fired by Luke Haynes. And so the fact that I just ran into Glenn out of pure serendipity was just the weirdest thing in a city of many, many millions. So, my British rock and roll fantasy was just had completely come to fruition.
Yeah, it's always good to run into the people that fired you.
Yeah, he didn't fire me, although he was probably fired within a couple of months of when I was. So after all these adventures, I flew back to Milwaukee and I enjoyed the Christmas of 1993 at my parents' house in Green Bay. And it actually took about 3 weeks to shake that jet lag. You know, that was also part of the gift that radio had bestowed on me that year.
And you still have jet lag, right? This 30 years later, you're still living with jet lag.
I do. I am practically comatose most of the time.
Well, that's a great story. And obviously it's enhanced by the fact that this band that you traveled with when they were just starting are now legendary. And it's so nice that you get to stay at their house and everything when these days you couldn't get within 10,000 miles of their Christmas, let alone their Hanukkah or their Be Happy Day.
True.
But you're always welcome at mine because I'm still nobody.
I appreciate that. All levity aside, I'm grateful for the generosity of the members of Radiohead and their management to give me that experience. That is one I'll remember for the rest of my life. And I'm grateful to friends like Corin Tucker, who have been so generous in helping to support this show, not only with stories like the one she shared for this holiday episode, but also introducing us to Fred Armisen and her and Carrie Brownstein being among our first guests on the show. I just really appreciate that.
Well, let's be honest here. She is the MVG, the most valuable guest.
Yes, she gets that trophy. For our listeners, we really hope that you have wonderful, restful, safe, fun holidays with your friends and family. And we are grateful to you for listening and supporting our show.
And it is a gift to us every time you rate, review, and follow us. And if you haven't, come on, it's the holidays. Do us a favor, right? Get on Apple Podcasts or whatever and leave us a glowing review for the holidays. We'd be very, very grateful for that.
It's just like you, Alan, to throw a little guilt in there at the end of this nice, warm, fuzzy.
Absolutely.
Take the MMA sweatshirt off now. It's making you aggressive.
If it wasn't for guilt, I'd have no emotions.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye.
Too Much Effing Perspective is a Milwaukee Talkies original.
Evergreen Podcast Network.